Welcome back for another video. As highly requested, next up in the pre-season series, we're going to talk about the Gameweek 1 bench boost. I'll do you one better though, we're also going to look at a Gameweek 2 bench boost draft and then we'll compare which is better and why. So historically, the Gameweek 1 bench boost was always really rarely done. It's a sound strategy now though, because we're going to get one of every chip for each half of the season, and that's why it's suddenly a huge talking point. The chip was typically saved for double game weeks very late in the season, but yeah, FPL's strategy has been blown wide open with these changes, and that's great if you ask me. So let's talk about pros and cons quickly first. When you bench boost in Gameweek 1, you're effectively wildcarding straight into the bench boost, and this is the only time all season that it's possible. After Gameweek 1, if you were to wildcard and then use the bench boost the following game week, you're basically praying that nothing goes wrong in that week between that and the bench boost. It is unlikely, but it does happen. Like, one injury could completely ruin your plans. And when you get it out of the way early, you can now start shifting your funds towards a better starting 11 moving forwards. Whereas, others that use it after bench boost and after a later wildcard, for example, they're stuck with higher funds on their bench than they'd want. This does also work as a con regardless of when it's used, right? Like, others around you on the leaderboard that aren't using theirs, they're going to have a more stacked starting 11 in Gameweek 1. You might have a 5.5mm mid, whereas they can afford a 6.5mm mid. So some cons then. Gameweek 1 lineups can be really unpredictable. Scout made a fantastic table here listing the number of changes made from the final pre-season lineup to the Gameweek 1 lineup. We generally associate the final pre-season lineup as the one that the managers are going to want to use in Gameweek 1 for rhythm reasons, but that's actually not the case when we look at this. There's plenty of examples of many changes happening. In fact, more teams changed their lineup than didn't last season. So yeah, all it takes is someone on your bench or your starting 11 not to play and you've wasted the chip. Another con is that the budget gems always emerge without fail every single season during the season. It's going to happen again this year. There's going to be someone that you and I haven't thought about whatsoever that will become an amazing cheap FPL asset this season. The more of these we have, the easier that a solid bench boost becomes. Last season, for example, Morgan Rogers 5mm. The year before, Cole Palmer 5mm. These cheap enablers afford a much better bench boost. And lastly, there's always a very small chance of a double game week in the first half of the season. Obviously, it's very rare, but it can happen. But to use last season as an example, I used my triple captain on Haaland against Southampton in a single game week because last season there was more chips and double game weeks basically. And then Everton versus Liverpool got postponed. And suddenly they had a double game week where Salah smashed it, and those that kept their triple captain went on to score huge that week. Expect the unexpected with FPL. So as I say, I'm going to run you through both a Gameweek 1 and Gameweek 2 bench boost team. So for the Gameweek 1 draft, it's Areola in goal, who's got Sunderland on the opening game week. The goalkeepers are really difficult. Like Darlow and Dubravka, they're our best bets as 4mm keepers, but neither of them have got good Gameweek 1 fixture. Whereas Dubravka does in Gameweek 2, but I'm assuming that Dubravka makes the switch to Burnley when I say that. West Ham will have decent clean sheet potential for Gameweek 1, so Areola's in for 4.5mm. There's lots of combinations with this draft that you can tweak as you please. I've gone with Romero, Murillo and Virgil in defence. Like, you could have Sanchez in goal and then Van de Ven instead of Romero, but that would be a 5mm and a 4.5mm keeper pairing. Romero should do well this season for defensive contributions, and he does have more goal threat than Van de Ven, but not as much as Porro for 5.5mm. Murillo and Van Dijk are also interchangeable, like if you prefer Tarkowski or Milenkovic for that 5.5mm slot, or maybe Saliba, Kukurea or Vardiol for the 6mm slot. The midfield is somewhat template. It's Salah, Palmer, Anderson and Rogers. The difficult balance with the bench boost is maintaining a strong starting 11 that you're going to be happy to continue playing in future game weeks, and I think this midfield four certainly achieves that. I'm locked in with Salah and Palmer as my premiums now. Anderson versus another 5.5mm mid that's got more attacking upside is still in consideration for me though. Someone like a Dingra or a Rias. And then Rogers, amazing long-term fixtures, he's nailed, and he's just going to tick along with returns if you just stay patient with him. And then up front, it's a front three of Thiago, Watkins and Wood. So there's strong rumours of Brentford being willing to let Wissa go for the right price, and he had reportedly refused to train. Reportedly he might be back in training now. But yeah, if that transfer materialises, which sounds probable, I really like Thiago for 6mm. Of course they would sign a Wissa replacement, but he wouldn't replace Thiago in the starting 11 immediately, and he could just be a backup if anything. And there's a good chance he'd be on penalties as well. Füllkrug's played really well in pre-season, so you could also opt for him for the same price, 6 mil. And if he does become a problem, then you do at least have the benefit of very good bench depth when you're going for a Gameweek 1 bench boost team, if you're not able to immediately sell him. Some of you like Mateta, Solanke, Evan-Nilsson more than Wood, which is perfectly valid. They're all great. Evan-Nilsson does have a bad Gameweek 1 fixture, of course, so theoretically, if you're being honest, you'd probably have him on your bench. And will he get a return in Gameweek 1? It's not out of the question, but it won't be easy at Anfield. So, more importantly, what's the bench? It's Kelleher, De Kuiper, Van der Ven and Adingra. So there is Wood versus Kelleher and there is Thiago versus Forest, but it's quite hard to avoid attackers versus defenders. If you really wanted to swerve it entirely, then go Romero down to Van der Ven and Kelleher up to Sanchez, that works. It's just basically you're spending 5 mil on 4.5 mil in goal, as I say, which is probably more than you'd like to spend there long term, given that you're never going to make a keeper transfer, so you're just stuck with that. And if you wanted to avoid Thiago versus Forest defence, then you could sell Murillo for another 5.5 mil defender, or Thiago to another forward like Füllkrug, who I mentioned. So what about the Gameweek 2 bench boost then? I'll show you the whole team this time and how it looks for Gameweek 1 first of all. So it's Sanchez, Tarkowski, Murillo, Van Dijk, Salah, Palmer, Anderson, Rodgers, Thiago, Watkins and Wood, and on the bench it's Dubravka, Anderson, Esteve and Arias. Dubravka really unlocks the Gameweek 2 bench boost. Like if that transfer materialises, then Sanchez and Dubravka is just perfect, because in Gameweek 2 Burnley have got Sunderland home. Failing that, you can go Petrovic and Kelleher, that works, because Bournemouth are home to Wolves and Brentford are home to Villa in Gameweek 2. So yeah, it's a fantastic team for Gameweek 1 out of the gates. Just 2 away fixtures in the starting 11 in fact. We can't look at Gameweek 2 on the FPL site of course, so what I've done is I've loaded the team into Plan FPL. Really good free site by the way, planfpl.com. So this gives a bench boost of Dubravka and Esteve home to Sunderland, Arias versus Bournemouth and Anderson home to Man United. So I think this gives a better bench boost, and of course if there is some surprise in Gameweek 1 you can also just pivot away and save it for later and go for a different strategy. Those of you that have been looking at the Gameweek 1 and or Gameweek 2 bench boost, have you been able to put something together that you're fully satisfied with? I found it really difficult. Like, first of all, the difficulty is the fixtures. They aren't perfect and you've got attackers versus defenders a bit, and the fixtures aren't quite as nice as I'd like. So yeah, this is the best that I could put together. So what's my verdict? Well, I'm not able to put together what I feel like is like a really, really good bench boost team that feels like it ticks every box. You know, good fixtures, maximum upside without attackers versus defenders facing one another and so on. So therefore I'm looking to save my bench boost, and hopefully it all becomes a bit clearer at a later date, whether that's, you know, immediately after wildcarding, or maybe there'll be a week at some point where the bench lines up perfectly. Like it has happened in past seasons, it always does, where you're picking your team for the next game week and suddenly you realise how much of a benching nightmare you've got for that game week. And you know, a bench boost would have worked that week. Well, this season's going to be very different because now we've got one that we can use in the first half of the season, so that's viable. Thanks very much for watching as always. Hit subscribe for more FPL content like this coming very soon. See you soon for the next one.